The Rational Male, Preventive Medicine by Rollo, Tomassi, Chapter 10. A New Hope. Worst part of the red pill? Seeing how I fucked up it all, really. There are days when I get up in the morning, sit on the edge of the bed and just feel like I wish I could forget what I have learned. I wish I could close Pandora's box and stuff all the knowledge of the stupid shit I have done back in there. Just go back to sleep and plug back in. But then I realized, while I can see how fucked up things are and that's a bit depressing, I was completely and utterly fucking miserable when I didn't know all what I have learned. Like when the blue pill was all I knew, my mystery was worse than I didn't realize where the power of change things ended and the things I couldn't change began. It left me with a feeling of so little power and control that I was miserable. There is a lot of research that says a big part of happiness is a person's life in the feelings of agency. I felt none. I was fumbling in the dark. Now, I can see where I fucked up, and there is a lot of mistakes I made that were choices under my control. But I didn't know it all the time, if I am being honest. Young, stupid, ignorant, me just didn't know. But I also each day see more and more clearly what is and it is not in my control. Further, before I couldn't have known how to control the things that I could control even if I had known what they were. Now, I learn more each day about controlling them. Ignorance might be bliss in some respect, especially when looking back on your own life, but when ignorance was the cause of your misery, it pays to remember why you educated yourself. Remember why you took those steps. While you are looking back at how you fucked up, think long and hard about why you fucked up. There is a good chance you didn't understand things well enough to make good choice. There is when my trying to be fair with myself about past mistakes comes from. Try really hard to remember what it is like being young you. Why did you make those choices? Did you understand risk-reward properly? Did you have a Socratic understanding of your own ignorance? Did you have enough experience to know for a fact that something was a bad choice? Were you aware enough of your own biology working against you to counter-interact its bad decisions? I bet we were a lot more ignorant and inexperienced that a cursory glance at old mistake from your current point in life lets you realize. I know I was. Sun Wukong, comment on the Rational Male. New Hope. In the first book, towards the end of the bitter taste of the red pill, I wrote this. The truth will set you free, but it doesn't make truth hurt any less, nor does it make the truth any prettier, and it certainly doesn't absolve you of the responsibility that truth requires. One of the biggest obstacles guys face in unplugging is accepting the hard truth that game forces upon them. Among those in bearing the burden of realizing that you have been conditioned to believe so long your comfortable ideals and loving expectations are really liabilities. Call them lies if you want, but there is a certain hopeless nihilism that accompanies categorizing what really amounts to a system that you are now cut away from. It is not that you are hopeless, it is that you lack the insight at this point to see that you can create hope in a new system, one in which you have more direct control over. One of the hardest lessons I have learned when I unplugged was throwing away hope. Not real internal personal hope, but rather the hope I had been led to believe was a realizable state, if circumstances, if personalities, if fate or some other condition defined by the feminine imperative would just align in such a way that I'll be conditioned to believe it could, then that feminine defined contentment could be actualized. I wanted very much to realize that idealized state by defining hope or having it defined for me in a context that was never my own real choosing. I got just as depressed as anyone else when I unplugged. I got angry. I didn't want to think that I'd invested so much on myself in something that was fundamentally unattainable because my understanding of it had been incorrect, either by purpose or by my own hopeful interruptions of it. Turns out it was both. My own unplugging was a gradual affair and came after a long draw into trauma. And yes, To realize that all of that trauma amounted to nothing after hoping and struggling to mold myself into something that I had led to believe was achievable was even more depressing. It wasn't until I realized that the hope I was sold on came from the several social paradigms that never held my best interest as a priority that I threw it away. That was a tough day because I realized in doing so, I would have to find a new sense of hope for myself. It seemed very nihilistic at the time, and I had to really make a determined effort not to make that choice from a sense of self-pity. That was tough to embrace because the old hope I was struggling to realize was based on the primary tenet of blue pill thinking, the equalist notion that men and women share a mutually acknowledgement, mutually acceptable concept of love. Once I understood this was an idealization rather than a reality, and that women can and do love men deeply, but in an entirely different female-specific opportunistic concept of love, I discovered that I no longer hoped for that maturity. It was then I embraced the hope that men and women could still genuinely love each other from their own perspectives of love without needing a mutual consensus. I remembered then an older man I had done some deeper counseling with while in college, and how this man had essentially striven his entire life to please and content his ex-wife and his now second wife for more than 30 years. From his early 20s, he had spent his personal life in the hopeful attempt at contemplating, appeasing, and qualifying for a mutually shared state of love, which he believed these women, the only two he had ever sex with, had really capacity for. At 73, now, he spent his life invested in a hope that simply doesn't exist, that he can be loved as a man ideally believes a woman ought to be able to love him, just as all the romantic, feminine-defined ideals of love he had learned from a feminine-centric social order had convinced him for so long. This is why I say men are the true romantics, because the overwhelming majority will devote a lifetime to the effort for actualizing a belief in a male idealized love to find fulfillment in a woman, and for that woman. Men will dedicate and take their own lives to realize this. Old hope for new hope. I hope that doesn't sound too fortunate cookie for you, but it's a prime example for redefining hope in a new red pill aware paradigm. You can hope and thrive in a new red pill context. I know I have, but it's much easier when you internalize red pill truths and live in them in the red pill context instead of forcing fitting them into your old feminine defined blue pill context. I can imagine what my marriage would have looked like if I hadn't made the red pill transition and learned to use that awareness in it. There are a lot of guys paying marriages coaches $150 an hour because they never did. There was a great comment I received in this regard that was too good not to include it in its entirety here. I think I get it. For years I have been bitter about this need to perform, about how this shows that women do not love us as we love, etc. And just now I was reviewing my old relationship and recalled something. In each of my relationships prior to meeting the women I eventually fell in love with, I was constantly working on myself. I would get in shape, hang out with friends, explore my environment and work on myself and my music, etc. As soon as I would fall in love, I would slowly drop those activities. I would focus on being a good boyfriend. I would focus on providing and being what she wanted, what I thought she wanted, better said. But here is the eureka moment. What I recalled each time was being unhappy. What I recall each time was feeling boxed in a kind of dull or feeling trapped. Is this what Rollo means when he says our responses to women is a conditioning, and that the sadness we get from red pill truth is the result of behaving and believing something that is not really our nature, but the result of having someone else's behavior and beliefs installed into us? So I think I finally understand it for myself. The talk of putting yourself first, of performing, etc., is really just a way of saying you don't have to do what people say you are supposed to do in a relationship. You don't have to drop everything for her. You don't have to stop doing what you like and love, and you don't have to kiss her ass. In my case, I dropped everything for two reasons. One was to do what I thought I was supposed to do, what I had women say they wanted from man, where my mother said a man should be, etc. And the second reason was insecurity. I wanted her to love me. I didn't want to rock the boat. I was scared of losing her. So eventually I did. I believe that in order for me to be worthy of her love, I had to go along and give her what she said she wanted, what I thought she wanted. What I was taught she wanted. Is it what Rollo and everyone else is talking about? Because I think I finally get it. Up to now, I have faked my game to some extent. I just knew better than to obtain things or did things I knew I would make me attractive, etc. to women. Up to now, I have faked my game to some extent. I just knew better than to do certain things or did things I knew would make me attractive, etc. to women. But seeing this now, not only am I realizing there is nothing to be bitter about, I was always happier working on myself and my interest and actually resentful of having to stop them. But that I am actually happier doing this thing women want us to call performing. In a way, you are performing, as Rollo says. Either way, if you stop and think you can rest, in many ways you are doing so to believe you have been conditioning to believe, as I was, that you should. That real love meant you could and should. Anyway, maybe this is simply me and my personal experience of it, but it makes sense to me, and I think this has revealed something monumental, personally. Maybe other guys have different experiences on it, but this is how I have seen it played in my own life. I feel better. Unlearning. The key to living in the red pill context is to unlearn your blue pill expectation and dreams of finding contentment in them and replace them with the expectation and aspiration based on realistic understanding of the red pill truths. Learn this now. You will never achieve contentment or emotional fulfillment in a blue pill context with red pill awareness. Killing your inner beta is a difficult task, and part of this is discarding an old comfortable blue pill paradigm. For many newly unplugged, red pill aware men and temptation is to think they can use this new understanding to achieve the goal states of their preconditioning blue pill ideals. What they don't understand is that not only are those blue pill goal states flawed, but they are also based on flawed understanding on how to attain them. Red pill awareness demands a red pill context for fulfillment. Never seek emotional fulfillment through women. Blue pill fulfillment is based on a feminine primary blue pill conditions for the contentment. Even when men achieve this blue pill goal state, the ones they have conditioned to believe they should want for themselves, they find themselves discontent with those states and trapped by the realities of them. The period when a man is not striving to achieve or maintain those blue pill goal states are the times he will be most fulfilled in his life, talents, and ambitions. As if this weren't enough to convince a man he needs to reimagine himself in a red pill primary context. When women are presented with a perfect guy in a blue pill context, they gradually, sometimes immediately, come to despise him. As proven by their actions, even women don't want the blue pill perfected goal state because it stagnates the otherwise exciting, self-important men they are aroused by and attracted to in a red pill context. Women should only be a complement to a man's life, never the focus of it. Living in a blue pill context and hoping you can achieve fulfillment in it is fundamentally flawed goal states, conditions meant to make women the focus of their lives. Throw that hope away and understand that you can create hope in new systems, one in which you have more direct control over. Afterward. So what's the endgame role? By subscribing to your preventive medicine plan, men can and will protect themselves from being casualties of the feminine imperative. But what are you ultimately striving for? Is it to remain in the perpetual state of plate spinning breeze? Do we game the older hens and then leave the cracking? Do we game the older hens and then leave the cracking when they make their stake of commitment? Do we game the older hens and then leave them clacking when they make their stake for commitment? Do we just ignore women unless they are under 27 and down to fuck? As I mentioned in the introduction, This series probably won't address the particular personal issues some readers will want it into. As I mentioned in the introduction, this series probably won't address particular personal issues as some readers will want it to. I also understand that while I can provide this outline, it doesn't really go into the depth about how a man might use his knowledge to his best advantage with his particular woman. However, my hope is that this will put certain behaviors and mindset you find in women and how you align or don't align in this outline into something more understandable for your individual experience. This is no way comprehensive or meant to account for every woman's circumstances, but rather to help a man with what we can expect in various phases. It's preventive medicine, not a cure for any particular disease. Imagine for a moment I had a temerity to presume that I know exactly what a 60-year-old reader experiences in his personal life with postmenopausal wife. I could take a good stab at it. In fact, I have an essay about dealing with menopause, but anything specific I could prescribe for him would be based on my best guesses, speculations, and according to how I have observed and detailed issues in this series or any of my past work. From my arrest post on the Shushev forum, I've had men ask me for some medicine for their condition, some personalized plans that will work for them. This sentiment exactly what makes PUAs and monospheres self-help speakers sell DVDs and sit at seminars. They claim to have the cure. I say that's bullshit. I am not in a business of cures. I'm in the business of connecting dots. Imagine any PUA guru attempting to force fit their plans to accommodate that same 60-year-old man's situations. There are various self-styled marriages coaches who make earnest attempt to remedy married men's lack of sex lives. But what's the real success rate? Is it even measurable? Even these outlines are just a map, a diagnosis that men have to subjectively modify for themselves by their own experience, station in life, and demographic. You see, your cure, your plan of action isn't what any other man's will be, or your future son's, or anyone else reading my work. I can give you a map, but you still have to make your own trail. I'm not your doctor. I want you to be your doctor. What I experience day to day isn't all what majority of men experience. My sexual past, my notch count, my 18-year-old marriage, and what I do professionally sets me apart in a way that I sometimes don't appreciate or take into consideration when I am advising men. It is very humbling and affirming when I receive emails or comments when men living in countries I've only seen in pictures, who nevertheless share a common male experience that reinforces many of things I write about. But even with that commonality, I have to remember my circumstances is not theirs. I used to walk through casinos almost every day, and I'll see the same people, not the fun grammar you see in commercials or ads about Las Vegas, but the real people, the overweight, the housekeeping, and the table crews, the geriatrics spending their savings and social security on a hope they will win something significant, the desperate, and the people just looking for a distraction. I walk by some of these men and think, how is game going to help a guy like that? While I do believe that game is universally beneficial to any levels, primarily between the sexes, but not exclusively, there is a point that involvement is going to be limited by a guy's circumstance, where he is in life and what he is made of so far. It is a monosphere cliche now, but most men aren't ready for the red pill. The red pill awareness is simply too much for them to accept within the context of their circumstances. That circumstances isn't based on age or a particular demographic, but game and red pill perspective is only going to be as liberating for a man in so as far as he's willing to accept it in terms of his own circumstances. Game gets a lot of misconstructed criticism in that ignorant critics presume game only ever equals sex-starved PUAs in a funny hearts. Those guys are solely interested in fucking as many low self-esteem shots as humanly possible. It is much more difficult and self-examining for them to confront that game is far more than this, and applicable within relationship, in the workplace, with women and men, and even in their family dealings. That's kind of scary prospect for men who are comfortable in living within their own context and circumstances. Sports fucking isn't what most men think is because they are never experienced anything beyond serial monogamy, nor is it what most better men even have the capacity to actualize for themselves. But as game has evolved, it isn't just about spinning plates or sports fucking, it's more encompassing than this. Game is, or should be, for the everyman. He only wants me for sex, or I need to be sure he is interested in me and not just sex. As the admonishment of women who really have no respectable interest in how a majority of men really approach becoming intimate with women. Oh, it makes for a good rationale when women finally want to get things right with a provider, but even the excuse belies the lack of most men organize their lives to accommodate women's schedules for mating. Mostly to their detriment, the vast majority of men follow a deductive but anti-seductive better game plan of comfort, identification, familiarity, and patience with women in hopes that what they hear women tell them is the way their intimacy will eventually pan out for them. Their better game plan is to in fact prove they aren't just in for the sex in order to get the point of having sex with a particular woman. I always find it ironic when men tell me that their deductive plan for getting after it with a woman is to prove he is not actually trying to get after with her. However, this is what most men game amounts to, a deductive attempting to move into a long-term monogamy based on what women, saturated in a presumption of gender equalism, tell him he ought to expect from himself in order to align himself with her intimate interest. I could use the term appeasement, but that's not what most men want to call it. Most men call it being a better man for her, better than those other guys who won't align themselves accordingly. It becomes their point of pride in fact. Most men, average men, and I don't mean that in derogatory sense, want a form of security. Most men are designed, perhaps bred to be necessitous. To be sure, men need to be constant performers and constant qualifiers in order to mitigate hypergamy. In the past, and to the extent, now this performance simply became part of who he was as a man and didn't require constant effort. But increasingly, as a male feminization has spread, men have been made to feel necessitous for security. The security average men seek is rooted in the need for certainty in his ability to meet with a woman's performance standards and ultimately avoid feminine rejection. In today's feminine-centric social order, men are ceaselessly bombarded with masculine ridicule, ceaselessly reminded of their inadequacies, and rigorously conditioned to the question and doubt by notion of how masculine should be defined. In fact, ridicule is the first response for any man attempting to objectively define it. It is this doubt, this constant reconciliation of his own adequacy to meet the shifting nature of women's hypergamatic drive, from which stems his need for security. The average man needs the certainty of knowing that he meets and exits a woman's prerequisites in a social circumstance that constantly tells him he never will, and he's just asking himself the question if he ever will make him that much sense of a man. The average man will look for or create his own rationale to serve his own necessitousness. He recreates his own ego in the image of what he thinks he embodies best as being alpha, or he'll adopt the easy doctrines of equalism, which will tell women and men are fundamentally the same and rational actors. He'll convince himself he's not subject to the capricious whim of the feminine hypergamy or some thematic schedule of women life events, because men and women are more evolved than that, but that nagging doubt will manifest itself when the right circumstances and right opportunities present themselves at the correct time, and just enough to make him think twice about that timeline. Changing your programming. I mentioned in the first book that I am not a motivational speaker. I am not anyone's savior, and I would rather men be their own self-sustaining solutions to becoming the men they want and need to be, not a Rollo Tomassi success story, but their own success stories. That said, Let me also add that I would not be willing to write what I do if I thought that biological determinism, circumstances, and social conditioning were insurmountable factors in a man's life. Men can accomplish great things through acts of will and determination. God willing, there can be masters of those circumstances, and most importantly, masters of themselves. With a healthy understanding, respect, and an awareness of the influences in his own condition, a man can overcome and thrive within the context of them, but he must first be aware of and accepting of the condition in which he operates and maneuvers. You may not be able to control the actions of others. You may not be able to account for women hypergamy, but you can be prepared for them. You can protect yourself from the consequences of them, and you can be ready to make educative decisions on your own based upon that knowledge. You can unplug. You can change your programming, and you can live with a better life no matter your demographic, age, past regrets, and present circumstances. Rollo, Tomassi. End of chapter 10 and end of the book, The Rational Male, Preventive Medicine.